In this video, I will show you the most efficient way to replace the coolant flange in a BMW with the M57 engine. I will also tell you whether it is worth buying an aftermarket replacement, how to bleed the entire system after the replacement, and what you should not do under any circumstances. Now enough talk, let's get to work. To replace the coolant flange, you first need to get rid of the water from the cooling system, so I'm unscrewing the radiator drain plug and draining the coolant. Some people believe that the replacement can be done without removing the intake manifold. But first of all, there isn't much space under the manifold, so working without seeing what you're doing is a real pain. Secondly, the coolant flange is located directly above the glow plug control unit, and if we tighten it incorrectly or seat the gasket wrong, the controller will get soaked, which generates massive additional costs. I will do it the classic way to avoid any risk, so after draining the coolant, I remove the cabin filters, the center engine brace, and the acoustic insulation cover. Next, we have the intake manifold in front of us, where I disconnect all electrical plugs, unscrew the oil dipstick mount, and disconnect the clamp securing the EGR system to the EGR cooler. To avoid cracking the manifold, I first loosen all the housing bolts evenly, and only then proceed to unscrew them completely. Once the part is loose, I remove it along with the throttle body and set it aside in a safe place, which gives us full access to our coolant flange. I start by unlocking the metal clips that secure the hoses from slipping off under pressure, but before I pull them out, I'll lay a rag underneath just in case, keeping in mind that the glow plug control unit is right below the coolant flange, and mine was recently refurbished. There shouldn't really be any water left in the system, but I'd rather not risk it. I'm trying to pull off the cooling hoses now, but to be honest, I'm having a tough time with it because nobody has looked in here for years, and all that sediment floating inside has completely jammed the gaskets. In a situation like this, we'll work around it. First, I'll unscrew the flange from the engine block. It's held by 3 bolts, and once they're out, I'll pop it off the cast iron with one strong, decisive move. It turns out everything has drained out, and it's already quite dry inside, which is great. Now, disconnecting the water hoses is much easier, but you have to be careful not to pull too hard because they are quite stiff and we have a limited range of motion. This is exactly what my old flange looks like. It was leaking right here. And now I know exactly what happened. The gasket started failing due to age. That's very dangerous because it's hard to spot such a small leak in time. The first symptom is the coolant level dropping in the expansion tank. If you see the level below minimum, you need to start looking for where that fluid is escaping. Luckily, everything will be like new in a moment. I'll start by thoroughly cleaning both the engine block of the excess grime that has settled on it and the inside of the water hoses, because there's some sediment and scale on the gaskets right now. I've already prepared 2 new coolant flanges. One, the one with the sticker, is an OE product, and the one on the right is a replacement from a reputable brand from an auto parts store. I have 2 pieces because I want to show you exactly why I had to order the flange directly from the BMW shop. It turned out that after installing the replacement, the bolts fit perfectly and the large hose fit quite okay. But the small circuit was completely loose and leaking despite having a proper healthy gasket inside. In short, the replacement was total junk. After taking it off, I'll give you one more pro tip worth using. Before installing the new part, it's a good idea to take a bit of fresh engine oil and lubricate all the gaskets, both the one connecting to the engine and especially those inside the hoses. This makes sliding them onto the flange incredibly easy, and you're guaranteed not to damage the seals by forcing them on. If you like what I'm doing, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you. Right now, I'm installing the new flange, tightening all the bolts by hand as much as possible. You have to be a bit careful here, so none of them drop deep into the engine bay, because then you'll have to pull the under tray just to get it out. And as you can probably guess, that's exactly what happened to me. These hands of mine are so clumsy. What a total waste of time. Later, I tighten all the bolts with a torque wrench set to 10 Newton meters. It's better not to wing it. Remember, this is a plastic part that can crack easily. To be fair, there are metal versions out there that should be bulletproof, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to get my hands on one. Now I'm sliding both hoses onto the flange collar, being careful not to crush the gaskets too hard. Since they've been lubricated with oil, both should slide on fairly easily. Once everything is in place, I also close the metal retaining clips. We're going to do a little leak test now. I'm pouring distilled water into the expansion tank because I'm planning to flush the entire cooling system later. If you aren't planning to do that, go ahead and pour in the proper coolant right away. Once I reach the correct level, I'm checking our flange from every side, looking for any signs of leaks, which I don't see in this case. The only time that might happen is if the gasket in the water hoses is damaged, but it isn't here. Before we move on to the most important stage, which is bleeding the system, I'm putting the intake manifold back in its place. First, I'm clipping in all the electrical plugs while I still have a bit more room to get my hands underneath. I'm also tightening the EGR valve clamp and threading all the bolts by hand, doing it gently until I hit the first sign of resistance. This plastic component is 24 years old and needs to be treated very carefully, so I'm tightening the bolts in a cross pattern using a torque wrench. I'm using 15 Newton meters for those larger nuts hidden deeper down, and 10 Newton meters for the bolts on the upper part of the manifold. I'll hold off on putting back the engine cover and the rest of the plastics for a moment, as it'll be easier to spot a potential leak during the bleeding process without them. The bleeding process itself is a very important and precise procedure, and I'll tell you how to do it right. Previously, we were adding fluid to the expansion tank. Now, I'm opening the bleed valve located near the EGR cooler. As soon as drops of coolant appear, I close it, and I do exactly the same with the bleeder hidden under the throttle body. To get to that one, you have to remove the intake duct, because without doing that, it's very difficult to even fit a screwdriver in there. After letting the air out, I check the fluid level and top up any shortages. Next, I start the engine, also switching on the blower to any speed and the heating to the max. And I warm up the car to a temperature of 71 degrees Celsius, because that is when the first thermostat opens and lets air into the system. I don't drive the car, I warm it up strictly while stationary, because in these conditions, the small water circuit has enough time to pump out the air. After reaching 71 degrees, I immediately shut off the car and wait until the engine has completely cooled down. At this point, the air from the first thermostat has partially turned into steam and cannot be removed at this temperature, which is why the car needs to cool off. Once it's cool, I open the filler cap, top up the coolant, start the car again, and warm it up a second time while stationary to a temperature of 89 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, the main thermostat opens and again releases air into the system that was trapped behind it before opening. After reaching this temperature, I shut off the car and let it cool down completely for the second time, because once again, the small circuit is unable to get rid of the steam that is formed in the cylinder head at this moment. After cooling down completely, I bleed the excess air one more time through the EGR bleeder and the bleeder under the throttle body. I top up the coolant for the last time, start the car for the third time, and warm it up to full operating temperature. Finally, I don't shut off the car. I let it idle for a while longer and check to see if any leaks have appeared in the surrounding area. If everything is fine, our replacement is complete. Congratulations! It's worth checking after some time if the fluid level in the tank is dropping, as any potential losses in the level will indicate a small leak, and if that happens, you need to find where it's occurring. If you enjoyed this material, check out my other video about the full rebuild of this immortal engine. Take care!